Hey everyone, and welcome to Success on Understandable English. In this series, we talk to people who have had success learning English, and we learn what they did to achieve it. Today's guest is Katya, so let's get to it. So, hello Katya, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm great, very excited, a bit nervous, but mostly excited. Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing well. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do for work, and so on.
Yeah, so my name is Katya, or Kate, as my students call me typically. I'm from Russia originally, but I've been living in Mexico for almost like 2 years, and I'm a teacher. Yeah, I'm an English teacher, and Russian is a foreign language teacher, and a linguist.
So obviously our questions today will be focused on English because this is an English channel and you're an English teacher. So to start from the beginning, tell me a bit about where you started with English. What was your English journey like?
Yeah, well, I started as like most of my peers, I would say, from school, maybe like second grade, third grade, just ordinary standard state school, primary school, and we had like English maybe 2 times a week, something like that. And also I took some English courses, also like for a couple of years. And I guess this is how they fostered my love to English. And these two teachers particularly, I think might have been the reason I decided to become a teacher, because the one just looked amazing. She was wearing like very cool clothes, and she was blonde, and I loved her. And the second one was super professional. And I have very good memories related to these courses, to these lessons with her.
So you're saying that you started like most other people in school as a young child, but of course you continued, which is interesting. Not everyone continues because some people don't like it, some people struggle with English. And you said it was partially due to your teachers. What else kept you on your English journey?
Well, I was really into learning languages. I don't know, like one of these teachers actually told me that I was good with it, to my mother. She told my mother about that, but I don't remember this. What kept me going was I really had fun. I have always had fun, I would say, like when learning any foreign language. It's just something that maybe drives me. This is my passion, and I'm really into learning languages. So it was interesting, and just I saw the results. It was easy, kind of, for me. I'm sorry for all the people that struggle with learning languages, but it seemed quite easy to me. Yeah, not very fair of me. Sorry.
No, but I think that is quite important, is the idea that you enjoyed it. A lot of people see English lessons in school or any foreign language as torture or as pain, and they just want to finish.
Yeah.
So I think I agree that it's definitely the most important thing for learning anything, that you have that intrinsic motivation to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, also when I talk to my students, a lot of my students are traumatized by their experience with teachers, and most of them hated English at school, and that basically was the reason they didn't like attending these lessons and learning English on the whole.
I can see that as well with myself, because in school I had a very fun and interesting Spanish teacher who made me interested to learn the language. So for me, as I continue to learn Spanish, it's a happy memory about the past, and so it inspires me to keep going. And I think that's important for just about anyone who's learning. Yeah. But continue on. Just motivation, of course, doesn't give us the achievement. So tell me about your processes and the methods in which you found helpful and least helpful for you when you were learning English.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that consistency is a thing there. And I was lucky because at my school, we had something like English every day, I would say. So it helped me to practice English a lot. I can say that we had some kind of very, very cool or awesome lessons. Mostly it was learning typically vocabulary, drilling vocabulary, doing some grammar stuff. I don't remember that was much fun back then, like super interesting. I mean, in my secondary school, when I continued learning English. But it was consistency. So when I had a teacher that also focused on learning, I would say like chunks and vocabulary. So I remember learning sentences. So every time she introduced new vocabulary, we learned like a word, a collocation, or like a couple of typical collocations with a word, and then a sentence with this word. So I guess it helped me a lot actually to build my like basic vocabulary.
I think I agree with that a lot of people focus on grammar because they really want to be perfect and they want to not stand out as a foreigner. But from my experience as well, learning languages and teaching, is that vocabulary and seeing those words in context is very important. I always like to compare a new word like a statue. So you start with a big rock, and every time you see that word in context, you take a chip out of it. And so slowly that word comes into shape, and then as you see it for the 12th time, suddenly it's a picture and you know what it is and how to use it and so on. And so I like to focus on vocabulary, but not just naked vocabulary, but vocabulary in context and in various contexts. So
absolutely, and collocations and chunks. I would say I'm into now like a lexical approach, and I think it actually makes the process easier and more like effective.
Yeah, I agree. I mostly do my studying on my own, and so I do a lot of reading because I don't have a lot of extra time or money to spend on private lessons with a tutor or such, and so I really like to be consistently reading at least 10-15 minutes a day, trying to focus on expanding the vocabulary, and grammar comes to me a bit more naturally because it's something I see in the book as I read or I hear, and then I can repeat that structure that I saw.
Yeah, exactly. And grammar should be very contextual, I would say. Yeah, it's much easier to use a structure specifically for the situation where you need it, and not to remember or grasp all the rules. For example, regarding, let's say, I don't know, present perfect participle, like having and then something, like you will never ever in colloquial English use that, but you can use phrases like having said that, which is a very good example of like present perfect participle, and you will use that, but you will not use any other phrases. Well, mostly, if we're talking about spoken English, not written English.
Yeah, definitely. And also with a lot of grammar, if you compare the English language in the US to England, sometimes, or in Britain, you can sometimes see some variances where I would use the present simple, whereas the rules say that I should use the present perfect. And is that wrong? Well, it's a question for linguists, but for me, it's still the language that I speak and I grew up speaking, and so for me, it's correct. Trying to balance your whole life on the rules doesn't always come out successful because there's those small nuances in the language as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's great that you mentioned that the fact that not all people are into like lessons with teachers, or maybe they don't have like money or time or whatever, like desire to take private lessons. And noticing here is really helpful. So when you read or listen or you just like immerse into English, noticing here will help a lot. And I would recommend just listening to native speakers to be sure that no mistakes are made.
Sure. And can you expand a bit about noticing? I'm not sure if I know that exact term, and I'm curious if it's something I've heard of under a different name or if it's something I've never heard of before.
This is something from lexical approach, and noticing is one of the techniques that you use to introduce new vocabulary. So basically, when you're reading something, it's important that you personally notice new words or new phrases, new collocations. And this is the first step, let's say, to introduce new vocabulary to your personal vocabulary.
So you're saying that it's about the focus, so not just plowing through and getting the half meaning of the text, but really focusing on noticing what's new and why it's in that context.
Exactly. It's not just reading for gist. Yeah, it's reading for getting some resources, let's say, that you may use in the future.
I always like to, I guess I call that personally myself, I call it vocabulary mining, simply because I feel like I'm a miner in a shaft looking for new things, and I'm sorting through all the rocks that I may have already seen, but suddenly I see a diamond or a ruby waiting a new word that I can challenge myself with. So,
yeah, you've got good imagination.
I guess
just noticing for me.
So with your adventures throughout learning English, and if I remember right, you speak Spanish as well. Any other languages?
As I live in Mexico, I also speak Spanish, and I can say that I made a few attempts to study other languages. Let's say, I studied French for 7 or even 8 years because it was my second language at school, just waste of time. I'm sorry, but no, it didn't happen. I cannot speak French. Although maybe I didn't have motivation, maybe I didn't have a lot of interest in French, or I just didn't have a chance to practice it as much as I did with English and well later Spanish. So no, didn't happen.
Well, it's good to admit,
and
probably,
also-
I think, because a lot of people might look at you and say that, wow, this is a extraordinary girl who has learned English so well and learned Spanish, and she must be, the smartest girl in the world. But now we see that you have failed at French, so it's not that,
Exactly.
it's something special with you. It's something that everyone can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's hard work. Yeah, that's right. Motivation, hard work. Well, I can say that. Languages were easy to me, but maybe they just seemed easy because I enjoyed the process when learning that particular language. With French, well, seems like I didn't. So that's why it didn't work out. I also learned Chinese for a year. Failed completely. Well, I just actually started learning Chinese as a challenge. I remember watching video with Mark Zuckerberg where I'm telling you, it's just he was telling the story that he decided to learn Chinese as a challenge. But I think his wife is Chinese, right?
I think so, yeah.
I'm not sure if she speaks Chinese, but yeah. Anyway, so he mentioned that he decided to just start the challenge of learning Chinese, and I was like, okay, why not? I like challenges. I will try, and failed completely because I just started for fun. But Chinese is a very hard, a very difficult language, and it requires very hard work.
I'm curious here, as you decided to start Chinese, what was your approach?
Well, I just started because I love languages, let's say. Then I remember I was going to China. I was thinking of going to China to teach English there. Very weird periods of my time when I was always seeking some escape from Russia, and finally I am here in Mexico. No, I was looking for a job in China, and but that's maybe I first started Chinese, and then I decided that I might go to China. Why not to work there for a bit? Yeah, and I wanted to be able to communicate. I didn't go there, and I gave up learning Chinese because that was too hard for me,
I've had similar circumstances where I've decided to learn a language more or less on a whim, and I was not successful. And I think in part it's because I lacked a true motivation for it other than for the challenge, which was interesting because it introduced me to the basics of the language and the culture, the structure, and who the people are. But without a true motivation in order to keep going, it was very difficult to.
Yeah, and I also would say that with English it's much easier, for example, or with Spanish language, as you can immerse in culture and you can consume huge amounts of material, let's say movies, I don't know, TV series, podcasts, whatever, yeah, well, Instagram, whatever, and everything can be in English. And with Chinese, I struggled to find something that I would like, because I didn't like Chinese music, I didn't like Chinese films, maybe Chinese culture, history would be interesting, but my level was not enough to be able to understand these kind of texts. So my interest just faded away at some point completely. Yeah.
Sometimes it can be more difficult to learn a language that is harder to get good materials for. Because, for example, I study Estonian, which is a European language. It's EU language, but there's so few materials out there for learning, first of all, and then second of all, to get a hold of books in Estonian, you more or less have to be in Estonia, and so it was very difficult to find those materials. But I guess I was, for some reason, very motivated for it. I don't really know why I'm so motivated to learn Estonian, but I am. So I found it, and I've kept going, and I've had success. So I'm happy with that. But
I also wanted to mention German language, because I also studied German language and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and actually everything was good with German, and I love the teacher. Yeah, my thing is I always take courses, formal courses, or I take private lessons. I am a lazy person. I admit that. Oh, okay, my cat has gone. Yeah, so I'm lazy, and I really admire these people who study something individually on their own. I can't. I lack discipline, and I need someone to, well, guide me through through the process and give me homework and check my homework and insist on doing something. And also, I think it saves my time a lot having a teacher. Yeah. So and I just stopped for some reasons. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't have time anymore, and yeah, I just paused, took a break. Maybe I will get back to it someday.
Yeah, I think some people do require that structure, and it really depends on the person. I think as I've gotten a bit older and studied longer, I've started to figure out what structure works best for me. Whereas a structured lesson for me it can be useful if I'm in the mood and I have the time for it, but I also enjoy a little bit more unstructured stuff because it fits my schedule more. But of course, I spend more time then planning and looking for materials and trying to figure out what I need to do next, whereas a teacher, of course, can always guide you to that point. So. Well, that's all for today. I hope you learned something new and found some new inspiration and motivation. Do you have any questions for Katya? If so, write them in the comments below and we'll respond. If you learned something new, don't forget to like, subscribe, and have a wonderful day. Toodles!